A lot of people think life begins when you're born or conceived or whatever other answers they're coming up with these days. For some people, though, life actually begins the day a doctor tells them that if they don't make some serious changes in their lives, they're going to die. You see, my life began the morning of my 41st birthday in January of 2019. I stood staring in the mirror, looking back on my life after stepping on the scale and finding out I was over 400 pounds for the second time in my life. You know, my dad died when I was 17. So my choice was plain to see in front of me. Either I take charge of my health, make the necessary changes to live, or do nothing and die knowing that my daughter, being only 6 years old, would spend the majority of her life calling some other man daddy. Can't you see? There's no one coming to save me in this moment. It was me who had to become the hero in my story. You know, we live in a world that has a system in place to remove all accountability from every decision we ever make. Taking accountability and fixing the problem is painful. It's like a journey through the pit of hell while feeling the pain of every lost soul that resides there. But in the end, the journey becomes the foundation of your testimony. My fight has become my calling. So if you're out there struggling and you hear the sound of my voice, I'm telling you that your story is not over. As long as you have breath in your lungs, there is still time. But it's your fight, your story, your moment to stand up and do what heroes do. It's a long road ahead, and it sucks. And maybe you're thinking you can't do it. But I'm here to tell you that you have all the tools you need. You always have, and you always will, because you are enough. And most of all, you are worth it. Nobody is more capable than you. Yeah, Friday! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you may be listening. Thanks for making me part of your day. This is episode 241 of the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast. And before I get started today, I got lots to talk about. I do want to mention a great place to stop by on weekends if you're looking for that workshop. So if you're on Weight Watchers right now and you're looking for a group of people to have around you as you go through your journey, Coach Sophie F., Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a great workshop. It's a great place to be. It's a great group of people. When I started this whole thing, I never knew they existed. And now I can't imagine a week going by and not knowing how they're doing, what's going on, and whatever else. The support found in that workshop is immeasurable. And so if you're looking for support, if you're looking for a place to really be accountable, Coach Sophie F., 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday morning. Join that workshop. If you see me, say hello. When you see Coach Sophie F., tell her I sent you. Now, enough talking. Let's get into this. Journey updates. So I am down this week. When I weighed in on July 12th, 2025, I weighed in at 215 pounds. That is a 0.2 loss. Total loss since January of 2019 is 180.6 pounds. Pounds remaining to get to the 200-pound milestone goal is 19.4 pounds. My stats for last week go from July 6th, 2025 to July 12th, 2025. Total steps taken in that time, 83,114 steps. That's an average steps of day of 11,873 steps. Total miles walked in that time, 35 and a half miles. That's an average miles per day of just about 5.1 miles. Nothing changes. Continuing on. No, the plan is in place, and we're just going with it. We're riding the wave. Riding the wave. Sometimes the scale is going up. Sometimes the scale is going down. Either way, the work is getting done, right? That's the way it works. That's it, whether you like it or not. That's the way the cookie crumbles, right? So I want to talk today about, I guess I can call it like the kings in our life. We all have kings in our lives. If we think about this, when you're born, you have a king and queen, mom and dad. They are essentially the king and queen in your kingdom until you become an adult, right? And at certain points in your life, you obtain additional kings and queens. And what do I really mean by that? So when you go to school, the principal would be the king of that kingdom, right? The teacher would be a miniature, like a mini king in that classroom, right? In other words, we have authority figures over our lives. As you grow older, your boss is like a king, right? If your boss is not the business owner, then you're talking about all of the kings above your boss, right? But wherever you go, if you really think about it, you're being ruled over, right? And all of these kings in our lives, if we allow it, they can try to start to mold us in their image, right? Now, whether we allow it or not, that's another story entirely. But they can start to attempt to mold you as they see fit. Now, to a certain degree, this is a good thing. To a certain degree, this is a bad thing. It really depends on how this is happening to you, right? But from a very young age, we are taught that we have authority figures. And these people we have to have a certain level of respect for, and sometimes we have to do what they say, and then we get to certain ages and maybe we don't do so much what they say anymore. We do our own thing. You have heard me say many times on this podcast that in the end, it has to be what you obtain has to be you who gets it. All right. It cannot be, no one's going to hand you any of this, right? You are given a certain amount of information, and what you do with that information you're given is entirely up to you. And the one thing I try to point out to you guys all the time is just because it's the information that was volunteered to you doesn't mean that it's all the information possible, that you had to go above and beyond. You had to go the extra mile for yourself to ensure you did everything, you laid it all on the line for yourself in the end. That was the point. not to get political here, okay? But if you're paying attention, if you have any knowledge of what's going on in this world right now, if you're really, really paying attention and you're really just not listening to what's told to you and digging deeper and all that stuff, you're going to notice something. And what you're going to notice is probably unconventional for me to use the vocabulary I'm using for it. But it fits. Trust me. Stay with me to the end. Today, now more than ever, global corporations, or corporations in general, large corporations, have more power than the politicians we appoint as leadership. And it's more evident than it has ever been. Again, your choice to see it. It's there. People who want to see something. Look, the world will believe anything for two reasons. Anybody in the world will believe anything for two reasons. One, they're afraid it's true. Two, they want it to be true. But if you're paying attention right now, and you're really seeing the actions of people, not the words, because words are meaningless in this world. If you're seeing the actions of the people that have the elected power, you'll notice that the people that have more power are the people that are donating to those people. And the larger amount of money you have, the more power really you have. And it seems as though, if you're really paying attention, that corporations are guiding how things are done in any country more than the politicians that were elected. So if I point all that out, and some of you will either agree with me, some of you won't, I don't really care either way. If I'm pointing all that out, could I then say that we could use the word kingdom for each one of these enormous corporations? Look, if you hold a cell phone today, if you hold a smartphone, I can guarantee that there are 4 global corporations that know exactly where you live, exactly what you do, your interests, what you tend to buy, what you not tend to buy, everything you search for. They know everything about you. At least 4. The manufacturer of the phone knows. Any social media apps you know, their owners know. And it goes so on from there. I can go all day on this, but that's not the point of today's thing. What I'm pointing out to you is each one of these enormous corporations could easily be called a kingdom, which means the person at the top would be the king. Right? And if they're guiding how things go, that means they rule over you. Now, what can you say is the one thing all kings have in common? In the history, in all of time, since time began, one thing all kings had in common. They're afraid that the people that they have power over will realize that the king only has the power because the people allow it. And if they really started to live for themselves, if the people started to succeed on their own, would they necessarily need the king? I talk to you guys all the time, and I say to you that programs like WW, are the beginning of a great journey, but they are not the end. They are not the end. And I'm not just limiting this to WWE. I'm literally saying WWE because the majority of my listenership comes from there. But any company that stands to make any money from you achieving any amount of health would not receive that money if you achieved it. Am I right or wrong? If you moved on and realized that there's more to this than just what counting points and whatever else, you would go and chase that and become more and more and more successful. So it would behoove them to make this process show you some progress, some success, but not enough to ever make you feel like you can move on to better and bigger things. Only enough to make you feel successful enough at least to stick around, and then, but not enough that you can feel like you can do this independently. And a lot of that comes with the beginning, what they volunteer to you. I mean, if you really grasped nutrition at the core and you really changed your life, number one, you'd be doing everything opposite of what programs like WW tell you when they're saying everything's on the table. You'd be doing something completely opposite. So, wouldn't it behoove them? Wouldn't their bottom line look better the longer you stuck around? Right? Their membership high means their company is more valuable. They work together, right? So they can give you some information to create some success, but they won't give you all of the information to create all the success. That's up to you to obtain. For the same reason that if a doctor ever cured disease, they would go out of business. Okay? So instead, they treat the symptoms and never actually treat the core, the cause of your issues. All of a medicine, modern medicine today, is treating the symptoms, not the cause. Because they know if they treat the cause, it's not because they don't know. Because they know if they treat the cause, there's no money in it. You're living long, healthy lives, and they can make sure that you die early and die broke. They're going to go for the broke part. Because if you're not here, there are 10 other people that they're making broke. So a king, his biggest fear is to have the people in his kingdom realize he only has that power because they allow it. And in reality, in most cases, there are way more people than there are guards in the castle. You understand what I'm saying here? And even though the guards may have more advanced weaponry, they're not taking every single person out. And if a bunch of people that totally outnumbered every single person in that castle decided the king should no longer have power, guess what's going to happen? So it's important for the king to make you feel lulled into a sense of comfort, to make you feel like you're doing well, but just well enough that you feel like you still need the king. Now, does that not sound how the world works right now? I told you before, we have many kings in our lives. Many kings. So not only do you deal with, at the core of this, the possibility of a company that is just trying to make you feel successful enough to remain a paying customer. And really, they don't care how much further you go with it. Not only are you dealing with situations like that, but then you're dealing with all of the other kings in your lives. The ones that create stress because, work is stressful. The people in your home. Everybody is for everyone who is trying to become healthy. Every single person. If you talk to someone, you say, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm trying to become healthy, they're all like, oh, great, good for you. And that is the words they use so long as one thing is correct or true. As long as one thing is true. So if at any given point they stop feeling like they're above you, if they start to feel like they're equal to you, or if they start to feel like you're better than them, all of a sudden, the support changes. The supportive, oh, go for it, man, go for it, you're doing great, gone. Instead, it becomes critical. There have been points in my last 6.5 years where people did not agree with what I was doing. And I'll start this with when I was eating all stuff in my face with processed food, Doritos, all kinds of junk food, fast food, all kinds of crap. I spent well over half my life stuffing my face with junk food, with laboratory experiments, doing stuff, poisoning my body for essentially 41 years. And with the exception of a very few people, hey, really, you should think about losing weight, most of the people just kept their mouths shut. And then as I started to really change my life, the words went from, oh man, you're doing great, keep going. And you know what? It becomes like a parting of the Red Sea, right? The people that were always going to support you are there, and they're never going to go anywhere. And the people that were only supporting you because it was just something to do, and now you're making them feel a certain kind of way that, hey, I can't feel bad about myself around you, right? I can't start to feel bad because you're doing things better than me. Those people are going to separate, right? And all of those people, they're going to have tremendous opinions about what you do. When I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition and I refused to follow the physician's orders, I refused to spend the rest of my life taking medications, when I went and fought for another way, it wasn't just the doctor that, thought I was crazy for not listening to them. That's fine. I expected that. But you scare a lot of people when you do things unconventionally, because if those people feel that a doctor is a king over their life, they feel that a doctor should be a king over everybody's life. Because God forbid you realize something they don't. They'd rather keep you where you are than for you to realize that all of those doctors are full of shit and you got it right. They might have to look back on their lives and realize they're a total idiot. So instead of actually seeing you succeed at something other than what's considered the norm, what's considered, let's treat the symptom and not the core, they'll start to say, what do you mean? What do you mean you're not going to do what the doctor says? That's stupid. I stuffed my face with all kinds of junk food for 41 years. Nobody said a word. I decide not to take medication, but instead to become very, very clean and very, very choosy with how I eat. And everybody gets a problem with it. I made a lot of people very uncomfortable when I started making those kind of decisions. And when I became successful at that and became outspoken, they felt the need to talk. Well, it's not for everyone. Of course it's not for everyone, because it takes hard work to trust yourself. Hard freaking work. To trust yourself more than anything. To trust your own gut. To believe you're doing something the right way, even though it's unconventional. To go against the grain is more courageous than anything else. So when you start to make them feel uncomfortable, they have things to say. They don't like it. I made some real extreme changes. You would have to be in a very, very tough position. You've heard me say it a number of times. The change will never happen until the pain to stay the same becomes greater than the pain to change. I had already made so many changes in my life that this change to me didn't seem extreme. It wasn't a huge jump anymore. If I was still eating the junk food of my life and trying to do what I did, that would have been an extreme jump. But I had brought it to the point where the majority of the food, overwhelming majority of the food, were single ingredient foods. I had a very, very simplistic food choices on my tracker. And then it became even more simplistic. And I decided to start eating in an extremely unconventional way, which would be the carnivore lifestyle. I never even got to the full-on carnivore lifestyle. There was always certain days where I allowed myself to have some fruit. And in case you don't know, the carnivore lifestyle is 0 carbohydrates, 0 fiber. Everybody had something to say about it. Everybody. When I was eating Doritos, nobody had anything to say. I started eating steak and animal fat and all things. Oh, you're going to have cholesterol problems. You better go get blood tests. All of these things. Nobody said a thing. If I would have sat in a workshop and opened a bag of Doritos, no one would have said a word to me. No one. I've actually watched members on camera in a virtual workshop open bags of potato chips, and no one says anything to them. But someone like me who says an extremely satisfying breakfast is, and then I go about everything that I eat 7 days a week, my 7-day-a-week breakfast, I start to describe it. Everybody's got something to say. They're too afraid to attempt something like that themselves. They themselves can't see themselves ever even thinking about doing that. So rather than seeing you do it and seeing the possibility that somebody can succeed at that, they'd rather act a certain way to prevent you from it. The kings we allow in our life. This brings me to my story. And maybe this might be a 2-part just because of how far I'm in right now. We have 5 men. One of them is a king. And he's extremely distraught he keeps having the same dream over and over and over again. And he's doing everything to try and figure out what this dream means. He's inviting sorcerers. He's inviting magicians. He's inviting anyone who claims to have any kind of the ability to see the future, whatever it might be. He's inviting them to the castle. And he's saying to them, if this is in your blood, if you are someone who sees the future, if you are someone who can interpret dreams, if you're a magician, if you're a sorcerer, tell me what my dream was. He wouldn't even tell them what the dream was because he wanted to test their ability. Tell me what my dream is. And they were so terrified to get it wrong, they didn't say a word. They all claimed to be able to interpret, but none of them would attempt to tell him what his dream was. Because really, if they are who they said they were, if they were the magician, if they were the sorcerer, if they could see the future, whatever it was, they would be able to tell him what his dream was in exact detail. That's the way he saw it. That if they had those skills, they would be able to do this no problem. Group after group, people after people. No one could do it. Everyone was mostly terrified to even attempt. Until this group of 4 individuals comes in. And really just one of the 4. And he's freaking out again, and the king is going crazy because he needs to know what this dream means. And he's basically looking at these 4 men. He's saying, is any one of you here that would possibly dare tell me what my dream was? Any single one of you? And then one man spoke up. And this man's name was Daniel. And he said, King, I know the dream you had. And so the king said to him, tell me my dream, if you know it. If you claim to have the power to see the future, whatever it is, tell me. And he explained to him that it's not him that had this power, but it was God who gave him a vision of the dream. And so the king is like, well, however it happened, just tell me what it means. Tell me what the dream and tell me what it means. And so he begins to tell him the dream in exact detail. He tells them that there's an enormous golden statue of the king. And he tells him in detail of what, because there's however many different materials used to make this statue. He tells him in exact detail. Now, keep in mind, this statue has not yet been built. This king, being a very prideful man and boastful and all these things, he's planning to build this statue. And so this man, Daniel, tells him exactly what the statue looks like, tells him the materials that the statue was going to be made out of, and then tells him that a rock will come and demolish the statue. Essentially, he told the king his dream in exact detail. So now the king is even more frustrated because not only did this guy get it right, he still doesn't know what it means. So he's like, tell me now. Tell me. You told me what the dream is. Tell me what it means. And he tells them that the statue that represents the size of the kingdom, and essentially that this king is the most powerful king in all the land. And there is no other kingdom that can compete with him. And he's going, so what about this stone? Where does this stone come from? The stone comes from God. Because God is the only thing that will take this kingdom out. That's what it means. It means that that rock hitting the stone and demolishing it is exactly God that will tear apart this kingdom. So the king thinks about this for a while. And essentially, he decides he likes Daniel and wants to keep him around. And because of that, he gives favor to his 3 friends. And he gives them positions in the kingdom, gives them all something to do, kind of a thing. And he still continues on with the building of this statue, knowing what the dream means now. He's thinking in his head, he knows the definition now, but he's thinking in his head, so no one else can take me out except this God. And he can't see that God. So what does he really care? Right? As the thing gets built and it's everything else, he's becoming more and more prideful. He starts to boast about what he's creating here. And so when he was done creating it, he was so proud of what he created that he demanded that everyone worship the statue. He demanded everyone worship the statue. Essentially, he said, there's going to be a bell ringing at certain points of the day. And every time the bell rings, you have to stop whatever you're doing and worship the statue. And if you don't, there will be serious consequence. And so one day, the bell rings. And he sees everybody bow except for 3 people. And right away, he's looking at the guards. Find those men and bring them to me. There was a punishment. There was a punishment for not doing it. And that punishment was being thrown into a fiery furnace. So he orders his guards to go find these 3 men. When they find them, they bring him in, and he realizes that they are Daniel's friends. So he decides, just because of the favor he gives Daniel, because of how much he likes Daniel, he decides to give them a second chance. And essentially, he tells them and warns them, if you don't do this, I'm going to put you in the fire and kill you. And essentially, Daniel speaks up in this moment. And he says, Your Majesty, they're not going to do it. And when the king starts to become infuriated, he asks why they won't do it. And he says, because it's part of our belief that you should worship no other man but God, right? You should only worship God. And their faith in what they're doing is so strong that even if God didn't show up, they would thank him anyway. That's how strong their faith is in what they believe. They have been taught since they're children that there is no other God to be worshiped. And they will refuse to worship this idol. He becomes infuriated because not only he believes exactly what Daniel is telling him. And so he orders that the furnace be made 7 times hotter than it's normally kept at. 7 times hotter. And he orders the guards to throw these 3 men in the furnace. They never turned on what they believed. Never. So, as they're throwing these 3 men in the furnace, the guards that were actually bringing them to the furnace died, because that's how hot the residual heat from this furnace was. They died attempting to put the 3 men in the furnace. And so, since no one could get in it, they voluntarily walked into the furnace. And he's watching, and the king is saying, well, why aren't they burning? Why aren't they screaming? What's going on here? And he's looking in there. He's kind of like, what's going on? Why is this so different? Why? I mean, I've heard many, many people scream. What's going on now? What's wrong here? And as he's looking, he could see there's a 4th person in there. A 4th person. And he says, didn't we put 3 in there? He says it to a guard. Didn't we put 3 in there? And the guard says, yes, we put 3. He goes, but look, I can see a 4th. And the 4th one looked like the Son of God, like a form of Jesus before Jesus existed, in the fire with them. They were prepared to die for what they believed in. How many of us doubt what we do in the littlest things? How many people end up doubting what we're doing just because of the kings and queens in our life doubt what we're doing? How many times have we caved in what we were trying to accomplish because of doubt? These men voluntarily walked into a fire so hot that the people bringing them to the fire died getting close to it. And they voluntarily walked in because they had that much faith in what they were doing, and it didn't matter what they were being told they needed to do. I guess I'll have to get to the second part of this story next week. It's getting too much. I guess that's what I'll have to do. But these people, in spite of what the world was trying to make them do, in spite of what the kings of the land were trying to make them do, they stood strong on what they believed. I sit here at this microphone every week, and my biggest message to you is WW is a good beginning, but it's not the end. And if you ever want to be healed of the obsession that is food over your life, if you really want to, look, if you want to live the rest of your life with the ups and downs of being attached to food and having your life revolve around food, then by all means go. Do what you need to do. But if you're out there and you are believing what I say, when I say that there is a way to look at food and see fuel. When you can look at a sandwich or whatever the same way you look at a gallon of gasoline, that's when you know food has no longer has power over your life. And whatever that is, whatever that power is, for some of you, that power is snack foods, processed foods, all of these things you're addicted to. Candy, sugar. When these things have that much power over your life, you cannot live with them. In order to gain the power, you might have to be rid of them for the rest of your life, or rid of them long enough to have power over them. And as long as we live our lives and food stirs emotion, we will never have the power in our life. There will always be something to fight. We will be the consummate recovery addict all the time. You will never have obtained the power over your own life. And if that's what you think is normal, and if that's what you want, and if that's what you're perfectly okay with, then have at it. But if you're like me, and you want to believe that there's more, it's up to you to find it. It's up to you to go above and beyond what you've been told. It's up to you to start digging for information that nobody is volunteering to you. It's up to you to do something unconventionally. It's up to you to be making choices that makes everyone around you, including yourself, uncomfortable. When you start doing all of this, that's when the real fight is beginning. Not living with coping mechanisms that are unhealthy, creating new coping mechanisms. Doing something to have food never be a king or a queen over your life for the rest of your life. This is going to be the most difficult thing you will ever do. And the world will come against you. The world will attempt to stop you from what you're doing, because not only is this just making you think, oh, this only affects me. Why does it affect? No, it affects everyone, because no one cares what you're doing until you start making them feel uncomfortable about it. When you start to make them feel like, oh, she's doing better than me, he's doing better than me, that's when you'll realize who's really on your side, who really wants to see you succeed, and who really just is comfortable having you in their life as long as they're better than you. And the problem with us is we conform. We conform, and we end up being the sum total of what we think we should be, what we think we're capable of, what we think other people think we're capable of. We never become the greatest version of ourselves. And that's sad. That's sad, because we allowed the kings and queens of our lives to tell us what was good and what was bad. We allowed the influence of what was considered the norm in a world where it's perfectly normal to not cure disease, but to only treat what comes from it. In a world where doctors have less nutrition education than chiropractors. This is just normal. And we're supposed to accept that. We get our nutritional information. We want to know, how do we fix this, from a doctor. Meanwhile, they study nutrition less than a chiropractor. Can we make that make sense for a minute? The bottom line in all of this is, never before in the history have there been more gyms and fitness centers. And never have we been more obese. Never had we had more urgent care centers, hospitals, doctors' offices, emergency rooms. Never have we had more. And never have we been more sick. And until you stop seeing them as the king and queen that they are, until you say, really, I'm the king, I'm the queen of my life, and it's about time I start going above and beyond. I start looking for information I do not currently have. I start making choices that make other people feel uncomfortable, that go against the grain, that do the right thing in the end. And you know what? You may get it wrong, but you may get it right. If you get it wrong, it's not as if you can't go back to what you were doing before. It's not as if you can't make adjustments and try again. The world is not over because you did something unconventional and failed. Instead, we just allow people to influence us over and over again. And we accept it for so long that we become one of them. And then the minute we see somebody else trying to do what you used to try to do, you become one of the people that holds them back rather than encouraging it. Because God forbid they do what you didn't have the guts to do. Then you would have to face yourself in the mirror. And who wants to do that, right? Who wants to face the accountability fairy that stares back at you when you're brushing your teeth in the morning or in the evening or whenever you're doing it? Who wants to stare at that accountability? It's not as if you don't know exists, but you can sit here and say, oh, I have a problem with mirrors. You have a problem with mirrors because there's something you know you need to be doing and you're not doing it. Your words and your actions don't match up. And until they do, you're never going to like the mirror. The person who does that can use the mirror normally and live a contented life. And everyone else just hates them for it. I love each and every one of you. God bless you all.